General Code, a member of the family of solutions that make up the International Code Council, would like to welcome you to the presentation today. My name is Brian Fatka, and I'm an account executive for General Code covering the Great Lakes region. I live here in Michigan, and in working with one of the local health departments, we created some processes that I believe could be of great value to many of you. I'd like to examine how Laserfiche can help the environmental divisions of the Michigan Health Departments. We'll focus on digitizing information, such as property records, and then automating the Type 2 water reporting process. Both of these processes can save a tremendous amount of staff time and help avoid human errors. Laserfiche is a document management system that organizes and stores information in such a way that it is incredibly easy to search and find what you want. You're looking at a Laserfiche repository where you could click through a folder structure based on parcel numbers to find the information that you are looking for. Notice when we open the document that we have tagged everything with both address and parcel number. So instead of looking through a file folder structure, we could just enter that information in a search bar and find the documents related to that parcel with a simple search. On top of that, Laserfiche has built some incredible automation tools that can simplify daily tasks and streamline processes for more efficient work. The Laserfiche public portal is a way to share pertinent information, which means no more digging through old paper files. The Benzie-Leelanau District staff were spending a lot of time answering calls and looking up data for septic pumping companies and inspectors. They decided to digitize all of their property records relating to the location of septic systems and then publish those documents to their public portal. The Laserfiche public portal can be stylized to look like the rest of your website. This one was designed with a simple Google-type search on the home page, or you could click the property search button for more detailed searching by street name and number. There is also an option to browse through folders, much like we showed before. Regardless of the method, people outside the office can now find the documentation they need to find a septic system's location on a property. The internal staff stays focused on other work, and the people in the field don't have to wait for their answers. While this system was focused on septic system information, the Laserfiche public portal is useful for all sorts of information, like public meeting minutes, historical archives, records requests, and really any publicly relevant information. Now, let's move on and look at how Laserfiche can be used, which speeds up the Type 2 water reporting. The process starts with a Laserfiche product called QuickFields. QuickFields allows us to take a lab report and break the data down into bite-sized pieces that we can use later to complete the report in WaterTrack. For documents that always look the same, such as these lab reports, we create zones to capture information, such as the lab name, or the sample location, or even the WISN number. The concept is that as lab reports come in through your email, you would store the attachments in a folder on your computer or network. You can see here as I start the QuickFields process of grabbing 3 documents out of that folder, and we watch as they all show up in the lower left pane. As I click on each document, I review the information we grabbed and make sure that it's accurate. Then I'm ready to send it to the Laserfiche repository for safe storage and for our next step. On the way to the repository, Laserfiche workflow is used to finalize some data for nitrate, nitrite, and bacteriological results. Workflow runs in the background so that when you're ready to browse to the repository and find the documents waiting for you, you again confirm that all information is correct before clicking the button which sends the sample to the state reporting website. When you do that, it disappears from the queue and automatically stores itself in the appropriate folder based on county, lab name, or WISN, depending on what you prefer. It also tracks all those little pieces of data we gathered which can be used for tracking and creating reports in the future. When you click the button to send this report to the state tracking site, you invoked Laserfiche robotic process automation. And while you normally wouldn't watch the process, I want you to see here how we trained the Laserfiche bot to log on to the website. We trained it to expand the selection list on the left and then navigate to the appropriate page. It then performs just like a human, entering a WISN number and clicking the Find button, and then it's able to select the appropriate laboratory and wait for the system to recognize that lab and then enter each piece of data. The bot would then click the Save button and close this window so it could start entering the next report. While we only showed a single report here, you could actually send multiple reports at once and the Laserfiche bot would do your work while you go grab a cup of coffee. I hope you were able to see that these automation tools could potentially save an incredible amount of time, remove the need to store physical paper files, and remove the potential for human error. If you would like to learn more about what we designed for health departments, please reach out and we'll provide a more in-depth look at the system and work to understand how Laserfiche could work for you. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to meeting you soon.
try to get this. Let's see. Move it to where it's full screen. No, okay. Obviously, me and technology do not mix. All right, how are we doing? Yay! All right. Good morning, you all. How are you? All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my little bout with COVID, but I'm going to start off that sad tale with some fun stuff. My career as a licensed New York City tour guide, which actually figures into my COVID experience. So in March 2020, I was celebrating my 25th year as a licensed New York City tour guide, a career that I've had since I was 25 years old. I was freelancing with several different companies, including a Marriott. Has anybody heard of the Pulse brand, Marriott Pulse brand? So that is their timeshare, essentially. And so these people could go to New York, stay at the Pulse, and they get tours for free. That's pretty nice, huh? Not free for me. I mean, I got paid, but they got it for free, which is great. So, but pretty much every day I was working, and I would tour people from 1 to 50 people at a time around Manhattan. And I would tour even if, again, almost every day unless I was on vacation. I was booked solid for 2020. That was going to be a banner year. And I remember in March looking at my packed schedule and thinking, how the heck am I going to do all these tours? Because I average walking about 8 miles per tour. I was looking at my feet. I was like, oh, this is going to be a tough year for them. But many people don't know that if you are to become a licensed New York City tour guide in New York City, you have to take a really hard test issued by the Department of Consumer Affairs. So that was my first tour guide license, you can see from 1995. But I remember taking that test. I actually remember the questions that I missed, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I barely passed. It was really hard, right? I had to study a whole year for that thing. So one of the questions I remember was, what is the weight of the statue, the sculpture of Atlas at Rockefeller Center? Like, who cares? And I have to say, in the 30 years that I've been a tour guide, no one has ever asked that. But just in case you were wondering, it's 7 tons. So, woo, I got it right, yay! And then the picture to the right, has anybody been to St. John the Divine? It's actually one of the largest churches in the world in New York City. So the other question was, who painted the rose window at St. John the Divine? Yeah, another one of these questions I have never been asked in my 25 years of being a tour guide. So in case you're wondering that one, it was Charles Connick from 1911. And that makes up 10,000 different pieces of glass that he painted on. He's like some big stained glass guy. He worked for Tiffany's. Anyway, so I would give tours, uptown and downtown tours, general tours around the city, and a little insider knowledge is there is a route that all of us tour guides take in New York City for these tours. So we all take the same route, and it's the best route to see all the attractions. But also, there's a lot of streets in New York City that you can't take a bus down because a lot of these streets are super narrow and they're old cow paths and postal routes and Indian trails. So we all do the same tour, so essentially. If one works as a tour guide, oh, there's my tour guide nerd picture. If one works as a tour guide long enough, we all develop kind of certain niches and specialty tours that we all like to do. And there is a tour for everything up in New York City. There is a dude who actually goes through Central Park with a group and you eat the park. Like supposedly there are several different varieties of edible flora and fauna. And yeah, watch out for the yellow, right? The yellow grass or what have you. But at any rate, so you name it. There's even a retired firefighter who takes people across the Brooklyn Bridge and tells them about who jumped, I'm telling you, there's another person who takes people around in a hearse and talks about famous mafia rub-outs. So I don't do those exciting tours. I do some others. I'm a big shopping tour guide. Anybody like to shop here? Actually, I'm not the biggest shopper myself, but I have memorized all the stores, the inventory, the salespeople, price points, or what have you. So there's a lot of boutique districts in New York City, Soho, Nolita, the Lower East Side, East Village. So take folks there. Also with shopping, has anybody done a sample sale? So sample sales are real big up in New York City. If you don't know what they are, So there's 14,000 showrooms in the garment district. So if a designer shows a buyer their last line of clothing or accessories and they're done with it, they sell it to the public to try to recoup some money. So a sample is an example of what a buyer can have in their store. So that's where we came in. That's where we're the beneficiaries of that, because it's our version of a garage sale. So tons of fun if anybody likes garage sales. Also, vintage thrift and consignment stores are real popular there. That Screaming Mimi is probably the most famous vintage store in town. And actually, Cyndi Lauper used to work there before she became famous. I also do tours of Central Park, but you know, all of us do if you're a licensed tour guide in the city. So it's 843 acres. We all have our favorite places to take people, and I have them myself. So for instance, this is a sculpture that debuted last year, right? So obviously very new sculpture. And here's something interesting. It is the first sculpture in Central Park since its history, which is about since 1850, of a live woman, okay? Of 3 live women, as a matter of fact. So in such a modern city, with all the sculptures in Central Park, just last year we got non-fictionalized live women. So it's called the Women's Rights Pioneer Monument. So really excited to have that finally in Central Park. Also, I love Hans Christian Andersen, kind of who doesn't? I love Little Mermaid. So I show them that sculpture. And there's this interesting stretch in Central Park called the Ramble. Has anybody ever been to this? Okay, so you know what it is. It's 38 acres, and it's supposed to look like a really thick, heavy forest, right? So that was a certain part to avoid, like in the 80s, because it's very thick in there, and but no, it's all fine. But it's called the Ramble, so that's a fun place to take people to. But there's, you know, I loved rambling off facts like there's 8 bodies of water, 29 statues, 21 playgrounds, 36 bridges and tunnels, 26 baseball fields. So Central Park really is awesome. And you know, it's the most touristed attraction in all of New York City. When I read that, I was like, really? Not Times Square, Statue of Liberty? But no, when people get off that plane, they really make a beeline to Central Park. So speaking of neighborhoods, because I love the neighborhoods of Lower Manhattan, I love doing a tour of Chinatown, Little Italy. I did one last Sunday. I love taking people to my favorite dumpling place and my favorite cannoli place. Does anybody know who has the best cannolis in New York City? Anybody know? Ferrara's. Anybody been to Ferrara's on Mulberry Street? Yeah, a few. So, and also, I really enjoy showing people like movie and TV scenes. That just kind of makes for a fun time. Yeah, any Sex and the City series fans? I know. So here's the thing. I see your head is hung in shame. No, hold that head high. I loved it too. Yes, let's unite. I was actually an extra in one of the episodes there, but I would do a walking tour of that, and that's where Carrie used to live from that series. So, but I especially love taking people in my old neighborhood, my current neighborhood, the financial district. So many things to see in the financial district, such as the World Trade Center site, the new World Trade Center site. Obviously, that's Wall Street and the stock exchange, and that is, who knows what that is? Yes, Hamilton's grave. I tell you, if I take students to that thing, they know a lot more about Alexander Hamilton than I do nowadays because of the musical Hamilton. But you know, you can't go wrong in New York City. Every street is just so interesting, chock full of restaurants and history and architecture. So that's why I was especially excited to bring my nieces from Tampa up to New York City in March 2020. It was their spring break. The oldest was a senior in high school. We were going to celebrate that, and also their mother is in the Navy and was deployed overseas for a year, and I knew the girls missed her, so we were going to have some auntie-niece bonding time. Like I call myself a PANK. Does anybody know that is professional aunt no kids? My husband's a punk. You never heard those terms? Anyway, it's a thing. I'm telling you, it's a thing. So shortly after their arrival, however, the city began to shut down. Broadway closed, restaurants closed. All my tours that were lined up were canceled in a day. And you know, it's interesting because things happen in New York City very slow, and then it happened very fast. So things shut down within literally days. And you know, to have that loss of tourism, and March is one of the busiest tourist months of the year in New York City. So to give some perspective to that, in 1995, when I first became a tour guide, 28 million people came to the city. In 2019, 66 million people came, and they're expecting over 70 million in 2020. So tourism brings in $70 billion annually, and it employs 500,000 people. Not just me, like tour guides, but also people who work in hotels, let's say ticket takers at the Broadway shows, restaurants in the Times Square district. So all of a sudden, all of those people were thrown out of work. And you know, they're still saying that the city, tourism won't come back until pre-COVID levels until at least 2025. And I can kind of attest to this past March when I was doing some tours, even last week, that I'd love it if it was earlier, but unfortunately that might be the case. So, you know, the city was emptying out, and right around us, I'm a tour guide, I was still doing some tours even when the girls were up, but it started kind of freaking them out, and to tell you the truth, it was very creepy on my end as well. I mean, I haven't seen the city like that since 9/11. So we also started, I mean, these are pictures of the city emptied out. There was also a lot of articles that were coming out in the New York Post and the New York Times saying that those whose health has been compromised by 9/11, the virus might be particularly destructive. And also, I think I remember telling you about the World Trade Center Health Registry that my husband and I are a part of. They also personally called us and said, this might be an issue. And I think they were making all the calls of all the members of essentially a club, the World Trade Center Health Registry. So yes, that did worry us. And we have something called 9/11 lungs, and but we're two of many who have that issue in the New York metropolitan area. So with that in mind, my husband and I were like, you know what, we're gonna go on home to, we'll bring the girls home to Tampa. I've never lived in Tampa. I've barely visited that. So we brought the girls home to Tampa thinking, you know, we'll take them home, we'll hang with them just like we were meant to do in New York City and get some girl time in, and then we'll come back to New York City in 2 weeks and all this will have blown over. We actually did think that. So we took a flight down to Tampa. We felt fine. We had been pretty careful when we were touring around New York City. But you know, as soon as I got there on the first night that we arrived, I lost my sense of taste and smell, which I've never regained 2 years later. Within hours of that, my eyes were burning, my face felt flushed and hot, and my throat hurt, my breathing was shallow, and my body hurt as if I'd been battered. And you know, at 52 years old, you know your body, and so I knew what this had to be. And I do believe I got it from somebody on a tour. Of course, I'll never know, but that is what I think I probably contracted it. So I went to the hospital soon after when I could no longer stand and was having trouble breathing. And it was there I was told I had COVID. And I was one of only 30 known cases in the Tampa area at the time in March 2020. And to back up a little bit, you know, meanwhile, kind of back at the ranch, meaning back in New York City, things were really falling apart, which I was very aware of. We left New York City on March 17th to go down to Tampa. Like I said, things were slow, then they happened really fast. So here's just a quickie timeline. On March the 1st, a woman was traveling from Iran and came back to New York City and tested positive. They quarantined her, and you know, all of the papers talked about that. And I was like, see, they're on it. You know, New York City's got a handle on this. They've already quarantined that woman, and it's going to be okay. And we were hearing a lot of things saying that, you know, we've got tests out there. We're going to beat this. It's not going to invade our shores or what have you. March 10th was the first COVID death in New York City. And on March 12th, the governor had declared a state of emergency, and that's when Broadway had shut down. March 15th, public schools closed. And actually, there was a lot of criticism that de Blasio didn't close in even before March 15th. March 22nd, the hospitals had run out of PPE, which still kind of shocks me. And nurses and doctors, healthcare workers were wearing trash bags. That also was the date when my friend, Dr. Lorna Breen, committed suicide. And if you remember that story, there was a physician in New York City who was so overwhelmed and overcome by all the death that she was seeing that she took her own life. And she also had COVID as well, which people believe, and I believe as well, because I knew her so well. She went to, like I said, went to my church, that it kind of fogged her brain. But that was a huge loss. On March 23rd, remember the ship that came up the Hudson that was meant to, the Navy ship that was meant to help for the overrun hospitals? Do you remember less than a month later, the tents out in Central Park that they erected to help with the overflow from nearby Mount Sinai, and that those tents were from Samaritan's Purse, a Christian organization. But it was just shocking to think that we would need tents in Central Park and that Navy ship. And then April 7th was the highest single day death, and that was 816 people died. But even this past December, it was tough. Omicron was really rampaging around New York City. People had cleared out the streets again. In fact, all of my friends who had not gotten it yet got it in December. And in January 1st of this year, 34% of all the tests that were taken, and even to this day, there's a lot of kiosks and little tents and even little vans parked all over the city where you can get free COVID tests. But 34% of people who took those tests from those little places tested positive. And January 4th, 44,000 new cases were recorded. So kind of back to my story. So when I was hospitalized, I was there for only 2 days before they told me I had to leave, and I left kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go. But they told me there was nothing more that they could do for me, that I had to go home and battle it out, and they needed the bed. I was actually told that. That night, I became so ill. Even all these months, a couple of years later, I realized that was a night my body was literally kind of battling it out to the end. This sounds so dramatic. I couldn't be convinced otherwise, but I do believe my husband kind of stopped a death process that was happening within my body a few times. I went straight back to the hospital the next day, and they told me that I had 50% chance of surviving, and the doctor did confirm that I had a bad case that was probably directly related to 9/11 lungs. Meanwhile, my 2 nieces tested positive, my husband did too, and my poor hapless brother-in-law. So it was 5 of us in a COVID house. And it took me about a month to kind of say that I believed I was going to live through, and then I didn't move much for the rest of that year, and this year as well. I feel like in the last 3 months I've been able to kind of get back to life, as a matter of fact. So yeah, just dealing with heart monitoring issue. My heart has been doing strange stuff, nerve ending damage, and other ailments that has been classified as long haul. But as sad as this story is, I just feel like with calamities, you've got a choice, right? In life, you either just kind of look at it and do the best you can, or you kind of succumb to it. And I remember one life lesson I learned in New York. When I moved there in 1993, I wanted to be a Broadway star. That is why I moved to New York City, is to be a singer. And that's really was my number one goal. But after 9/11, my goals really changed. I just really wanted to make each day count. I mean, that's what I had kind of gotten. That was the lesson that I learned from that. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to live with a purpose. And I regained a connection to some faith values that I had turned away from in my 20s. And my husband and I began to work for nonprofits there. But yeah, that picture of 1996 when I was wanting to be a Broadway star. And yeah, this is a picture of some of our nonprofit work in South Africa. As a matter of fact, there's my Zulu friends there. And we send a lot of kids to private schools and to college to help them. So when I contracted COVID, another thing that was a blessing, since I couldn't move, I'm a writer, and I wrote over 30 different articles that paid tribute to the upcoming 20th anniversary of 9/11, which is how Brian found me. So he had read one of the articles that I had written and asked me to come here. But it thrills me that I had the presence of mind and my brain wasn't foggy as some other long haulers have dealt with, that I could do that. Because I love reminding people about 9/11. But emotionally, I was just really grateful. I was really happy to be alive. That sounds trite, but I really was. And was super happy that my nieces, my brother-in-law, and my husband didn't get it near as bad as I did. That gave me a huge amount of happiness. Things like when my pulse oximeter went from the 80s to back into the 90s. I have a picture here of my friends Sarah and Jeff. We had so many people come over and help us during that time. Since we were in a COVID house, quarantined, so many people came over with food and supplies. I had a college friend nearby who brought me over protein shakes and vitamins. Somebody brought over toilet paper, which was hard to find back then. And Tylenol actually was as well. But I feel like our culture emphasizes independence and self-reliance and freedom, but it was a reminder to me that I don't want to get so self-sufficient that I don't allow other people to help me when I need it, and we needed help then. But this was my friends Sarah and Jeff. My husband had a birthday during our COVID lockdown, so they brought over a bunch of food, as you can see, also a birthday cake. They lit a candle, sang happy birthday, put it in the lawn, and I saw dust as they ran far away. I was like, you're very far, Sarah, you're far. You don't need to do that. But of course, that was obviously very sweet that they brought over that cake and wished happy birthday in the midst of all that. And both of us, Brian and I, are deeply grateful. But I remember, and here's a picture I put of, I kept my hospital bracelet on until I felt that I probably was going to survive this, which was a month later. So I had this ceremony of cutting it off, and yeah. So I gave my first tour back in New York City in July of 2021. And it was a church group who had requested me to tour them through the 9/11 memorial. So I felt so out of step. I had to even study my facts and figures. It's on that first day back, I was still very short of breath. I had gained several pounds due to all the inactivity since COVID. But just thrilled to be back doing what I can do. But the irony wasn't lost on me that I was also back in the place that where probably COVID in a way began for me, and the backdrop of my life, which is 9/11. But I don't live as a victim. Happy to be here, very grateful, and I'm back to realizing how every day counts. So I was doing tours the last couple of weeks, and the city is pretty humbled right now. There's almost like a sad state. I saw a lot of vendors that I haven't seen since March 2020, and everybody was hugging, and because by the way, March is a big month because of spring break. The whole country is the kids are on spring break, but there was almost like this sense of we made it, we were alive, thank goodness. And I've never seen New Yorkers, so nice since 9/11. It's almost like just a reminder of how life is tenuous in that way. But, I also saw a lot of hope that we're going to get back to where we were, and it's maybe a new normal, and that's okay. But there's a lot of hope in the future, and that's kind of how I want to leave it. But thank you all. Does anybody have any questions of anything? Yet another, if it sounds really sad, you have that man to thank. Brian. Yeah.
When do you think, so you said 2025, where's that number coming from that will come back? Or where's that number?
So the Chamber of Commerce, the New York City Chamber of Commerce they actually had said that from the start. Oh, sorry, the question is, where did I get that number of 2025? So the New York City Chamber of Commerce had come up with that pretty right off the bat, I think early in 2021. And they had said, this has been so devastating because it's not just tourists coming in, it is the fact that bus companies went under. So the infrastructure was going to have to be rebuilt. So it was all of the hotels that closed. There have been a number of permanently closed hotels and permanently closed restaurants that were friendly to tourists. So meaning the alternatives have to be found, bus companies have to start up again. So that was where they based that on. Yes? Well, that's a good question. So how did I handle all of the ongoing different directives from the government of, especially locally government, of what we were going to do? I have to say, I spent that time in bed, to tell you the truth. So it didn't affect me so much. And to tell you the truth, for a long while, people didn't want to see me. I actually felt like a pariah. That when I finally was over the virus, I was like, okay, I'm free. I can go out and see people, and nobody wanted to see me. So, which really hurt my feelings at the time. But I understand it now. But the whole quarantine idea was still in such an infancy that I've pretty much spent the rest of the year not doing much. I will say, when it comes to New York, I had a lot of friends who had real problems with what was happening to the kids in the schools, because the changing of the mask, the not mask, this lockdown, and all this, it was really tough. And I had quite a few friends leave the city. And most of my friends did leave the tourism business because they had to get a job. But it didn't affect me as much because I wasn't going anywhere. But even last week up in New York City, everybody was wearing masks, even though the only place that required like a vaccination and a mask were Broadway shows. That was kind of, they're like the last holdout for that. But people complied, or you couldn't get in, so people definitely complied. Yes, sir.
What was your favorite location or place that you like to visit pre-9/11, and what's your favorite place to go post-9/11?
Oh, interesting. Okay, so where's my favorite place to go in New York City pre-9/11? Believe it or not, I loved the observatory on the 107th floor. I like that so much more than the Empire State Building. That was my favorite place. Now, did you know there's like 6 observatories in town? There's a whole pile of them, even a few open during COVID, which was a shock. But at the time, there were only 2 observatory options, the Empire State Building and World Trade Center. But now there's a ton. So I enjoyed people taking people up to the 107th floor. They had a really nice, did anybody go up to that observatory? Yeah. They had a really nice, like, you knew exactly what you were looking at all, because they had it written on the glass. They don't have that in the Empire State Building. You just kind of go outside and what you see is what you see. So I really did enjoy that. There was this mall underneath at the World Trade Center, had 80 stores, and like, I would go there all the time. Like, ladies, do we remember? No, probably not. Casual Corner? Okay. So anyway, that's where I used to shop. That was the Casual Corner in town. And they all had that Warner Brothers store that used to be so much fun. Just say where do I like to go post-COVID? Post 9/11. Oh, I always had kind of shifting places that I enjoyed going to. I never got tired of Chinatown, Little Italy. Never got tired of that. Or just, all the neighborhoods that we have heard of, from Lower East Side, Soho, Nolita, Chinatown, Little Italy, Tribeca. They're all below 14th Street, Greenwich Village. And that's where it gets interesting. That's where the real history is, and that's where the history in New York City started. So walking tours of those neighborhoods were always, and they still are, my favorite places. I mean, Times Square is Times Square. I'm actually not one of those people who say it's awful and gaudy. I always love Times Square. But it's the neighborhoods that kind of, to me, make New York in a way. So, but like people ask me now, like, where do people go? And even during COVID, some things opened, which shocked me. Like the Harry Potter store is the big deal. There's a new Harry Potter store that you have to go online because the line gets really long. And there's a new man-made island over the Hudson. Has anybody heard of Little Island? They took a bunch of pots, filled it with dirt, created a 2.5-acre man-made island. That's just gorgeous. It's hovering over the Hudson. But even in the midst of all of COVID, life goes on and things open in New York City, and I hope that it comes back because it is a really fun place to visit. Yes?
You've identified that there's a tour for everything. Do you envision in the future a COVID history tour?
Wow. A COVID history tour. What do I envision a COVID history tour? You know what I think? I think New York's going to want to forget about that as soon as like a version of hell. I would say
At some point in time in the future.
that's interesting. And here's the thing. Honestly, COVID really hit Queens very hard. Over 40,000 people died, as I said, in New York City. That's a huge amount of people. But what was happening is certain hospitals got overrun and couldn't take care of it. People weren't dispersed evenly where it could have been better outcome. They were concentrated on some of these hospitals that's where they didn't receive care immediately, and that's where a lot of them died. But yeah, I think we'll want to move on as soon as we can from that. But yeah, tough times. Yes.
Chinatown, has it changed a lot knowing that we believe that the beginning of COVID was in an outdoor market, and Chinatown's always been known for smaller versions of that?
So what's interesting, so the question is, has Chinatown changed because of COVID? While the city was shutting down, it was around March 1st, I was still giving tours up until like the 16th of March 16th. And Chinatown, right from the get-go, and I felt bad for Chinatown, is people, like my tourist from the Marriott did not want to go down there because they felt that it was, a COVID hotspot potentially. And from my understanding, or what was told in New York, our strain probably came from Europe, right, and not from China. That's what we were hearing. That's what I'm going to kind of stick with that. So I just felt like, wow, I felt like it was being kind of targeted unnecessarily. And it was probably all over the city at that point. But when I was there this past week, it has really been devastated. It's really just a shell of itself. And yeah, it makes me sad because that is, New York City has 3 Chinatowns. And the one in Manhattan is by far the smallest, but that's considered like the cultural heart. So it's a blow to people in Chinatown to have it so much closed. Any other questions? Yeah.
How many, on average, how many tours do you do in a day? Is it just one or is it several?
So how many tours do I do in a day? So I could do several. The average tour is 4 hours. Some of the shopping tours you do in 2, because after 2 hours, ladies are like, out. We want to go shopping. We want to buy stuff. I'm like, okay, all right. So like, let's say a shopping tour could be around 2 hours, but the average tour is 4. And so I could technically do like 2 in a day. And I did, like the Marriott had a 10 to 2 tour, and then I would do, I think it was like a 3 to 6 or 7. So, but yeah, so it's hard to maneuver around Manhattan in 4 hours. But a walking tour, people can't really walk much longer than about 2. So if it was like a flat out like history or architecture walking tour, that's usually about 2. But when the shopping tours came around, yeah, people can't get rid of me quick enough because when I introduce them like 5 stores, they're like, okay, we have enough of you. But those are fun tours. I get it. My fingers are twitching even at the thought of it, of all the wonderful things to shop for in New York City.
So are you tied with the Marriott then?
I'm not, we're all freelancers. In New York City, if you're a tour guide, you have 2 options. You can either put yourself with an attraction. Let's say the backstage tour of Radio City Music Hall or Lincoln Center. Or if you're on a double-decker, what am I talking about? But double-deckers, do you know this? Have done away with tour guides. No more tour guides ever again. It's all audio, which I am not a fan of. Put a whole pile of people out of work. But at any rate, so you can either be a tour guide with a certain attraction or you can be a freelancer and freelance with a couple of 100 companies if you want to. So, but I chose to be the freelancing. But you watch out for those double-deckers. All around the world, they all went audio, which is a huge loss. It's so much better to have a live tour guide, but I'm a little biased. Any other questions? Well, hopefully I'll see you all up in New York, right, at one point? Okay.
Good morning. I would like to introduce our last speaker, the secrets of changing the FDA food code and other tales from the Conference of Food Protection. I'd like to introduce Becky Vogt, not Vaught, all for naught. You know, looks like that. She is a food safety specialist at MDARD, Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. Rebecca began her career at the Central Michigan District Health Department in 2002 after completing both a Master of Science and Bachelor's of Science in Microbial Genetics and Environmental Science from Central Michigan University. During her time at CMDHD, she was actively involved in all environmental health programs. In 2008, Becky began working as an MDARD food specialist, performing accreditations, standardizations, and trainings for the 45 local health departments and MDARD retail inspectors. Her focus is on specialized food processing consultation, which includes model documents and trainings for both regulators and industry members. Starting in 2010, she became actively involved in the Conference for Food Protection as an issue submitter in various committees. In 2016, she's been an executive board member, the issue chair for the 2018 to 2020 biennium, and most currently holds the position of chair of the conference. Becky resides in Higgins Lake, Michigan with her husband and 3 teenagers. Oh. And I'd like to introduce Becky. Thank you.
So thank you everyone for staying around. I know you were thinking, who's this Becky Vogt, right? I mean, it's not Becky K anymore. So I appreciate you giving me a chance to come in and show you the new me, right? So I'm here today not for MDARD, although I love my MDARD people, and MDARD is what got me to CFP, but I'm here to give you an idea of what CFP is, right? Because what do you think when you see a name Conference for Food Protection? You think it's this, right? You sit in a room and you get a bunch of education and it's great and you get to network. That's not at all what CFP is. It's a lot more moving parts and actually very little of this. So we do a little bit of it. So I wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like. I also wanted to go over a little bit of what happened with our 2018-2020 biennium and what you may see coming in a new food code. Is it going to be the 2021 food code? Since we're in 2022, we don't know what FDA is going to do, but we did debate issues for a 2021 update. I also want to give you a little bit of an idea on what the impacts can be from state and local regulators when it comes to changing food code. You do have a voice, so this is your platform for voice. Have any of you ever participated in the Great Lakes Conference on Food Protection other than getting a scholarship? Okay, scholarships are great. Not gonna, but so the Great Lakes Conference on Food Protection is not an affiliate of CFP. Michigan just kind of stole the idea and created our own little mini version of CFP. We do operate a little bit different at the Great Lakes Conference on Food Protection though. So you'll see some of the differences if you've participated in Great Lakes. Okay. I'm not going to read all this. The main thing, this is our mission statement from CFP. The main things I want you to consider here is that we seek balance. We are not regulatory, we are not industry. We are not consumers, we are not academics. We are all. And we want to promote that balance, and we want to have some uniformity in our standards across the nation. So that's really what our mission is all about. Okay, these are the objectives, and as you can tell, the main ones here, adopting sound uniform procedures, and this is the big one, mutual respect and trust. We want to hear industry, we want to take their ideas, we want to see how we can work with them. We want to hear regulator ideas. We want to see how we can work with them. We want to hear from consumer advocacy groups. So groups like Stop Foodborne Illness is a very active participant in CFP. They bring ideas, they bring issues, and we change food codes sometimes based on those issues that a group like Stop Foodborne Illness. And then the big one, of course, academic. We use our academics quite a bit because they're the ones who provide us the science background in order to make a change. Okay, so here's how we're set up. This looks simple, right? It's not. There's a lot of moving parts in all these. So we have an executive board. The executive board oversees all the activities of the conference over a 2-year biennium. We operate on a 2-year biennium because the food code gets an update every 2 years, right? So you've seen the 2009 that we're on right now here in Michigan, and then there was a 2013, and then a 2017. So those are the 4-year big model food code changes. And then on the off years of that, so the 2019 addendum to the 2017 food code. So every 2 years, FDA does a effort to change food code, and they do that based on the CFP that occurred the year before. So we operate on a 2-year biennium. So right now we are in what is now the 2021-2023 biennium. It should have been 2020 to 2022, but COVID screwed everything up and we are now a year off. So we kind of have this mystery floating year. So we operate all the time. The other thing that operates all the time is our councils. So we have Council 1, Council 2, and Council 3, and we'll go into what those look like in a minute. They're operating, overseeing our committee work. And then they do a bunch of their work when we actually get on site for the biennial meeting. And then at the biennial meeting, we have the Assembly of State Delegates. And we'll go over a little bit of what those look like in a bit. Okay, so the executive board, we've split the nation into 6 regions. I keep trying to stay close to this microphone, and I'm a mover, so sorry. We've split the United States into 6 regions. These were based on the FDA regions. FDA doesn't operate in these regions anymore, but we still do because our entire bylaws and how we do things are set up that way. So we have 6 state regulatories from the states, 1 from each region. I am your Midwest state regulatory representative to the board. That's when I was voted in 2016. Then we have 6 local regulatory, 1 from each region. The 3 federal agencies sit on the board and have a vote. So that's CDC, USDA, and FDA. Then we have the industry. So we have 6 food industry. We make sure that there's 1 from each kind of type of food industry. So you have food service, retail food, processing, and then vending and distribution. All get a seat. And then the remaining 2 are just at large. So the food industry gets to pick what other 2. So you can have 2 food service and 2 processing. Okay, an academic and a consumer. So those are our voting 23 members of the board. So now as the chair, that's kind of, I've got to corral all those cats. We also have a bunch of ex officio members, so people who do not get a vote, but are kind of expected to participate in all the board meetings and are actively involved in stuff throughout the biennium. That includes the chair and the vice chair of each council. So Rodney is our vice chair of Council 1, so he will be present at the board meetings. The executive director, executive treasurer, and executive assistant are our 3 paid positions. So all the people who do the nuts and bolts work of, paying people and posting stuff on the website and kind of arranging meetings and all that kind of stuff, those are our 3 paid positions. They're part-time positions. If you get involved in CFP, you'll see emails from David McSwain. He is our executive director. Okay. Then we have all of our standing committees. So we have committees that operate all the time, every year, every biennium. They don't have to be recreated. They're in our constitution and bylaws. Of course, stuff that deals with our finances. Our constitution and bylaws procedures. Mr. Dunleavy is our vice chair of that committee, and he's going to stay with me, he promised. And you guys all heard it, and it's videoed now. Program standards. So how many of you have heard of the Voluntary National Retail Program Standards? All right, some of you might be even enrolled in them. We have a program standards committee that operates all the time because the program standards are somewhat housed with CFP, and that changes and updates and proposed changes and updates come through that committee. So they're always operating, they're always looking at the program standards, looking to see how to update them, and then they run it through the issues process. How many of you have seen this symbol on your manager, certified manager exams, right? Okay, that's because our Food Protection Manager Certification Committee works with that ANSI and kind of sets the standards and make sure that the testing providers are in conformance with the CFP ANSI standards in order to maintain that symbol on their certified manager exams. So that's also run through CFP. Mr. Dunleavy was our chair of that committee for like 4 years and submitted a bunch of issues and did amazing work. Actually took care of an issue that we had had for a number of years, and he got on board and fixed it. So imagine that. We all knew he was wonderful. Okay. Program just deals with program, and then issues and strategic planning. Those are other two really big committees. So the issue committee deals with all the issues we get. We'll talk about issues here in a minute, but that's a lot of work. Strategic planning looks at what are we going to do in the future to maintain our membership and make things better. And we've got some amazing people thinking of some amazing things, because even though COVID was not good to many of us, there were some good things that came out of it and some good lessons learned. So our strategic planning committee is actually taking some of the things that we had to adjust because of COVID and hopefully moving forward to grow us. Okay. And then as always, we have some ad hoc committees that get created by the board. Okay, so as was mentioned in the bio, I am the current chair of the conference. My vice chair is Todd Rosso. He's with Publix Supermarket. The chair always is a regulatory person, and it's voted by the board. So I really was only competing with 11 other people. It's not like it's that big of a deal. So I will serve until 2023, and then I will remain for another 2 years as the past chair. Todd, he's kind of my conference whip. So like I'm the good guy and he's the bad guy. So I get to do all the fun stuff like run meetings, and then when I have council chairs like, Rodney not doing his job, then I can stick Todd on him to make sure the councils are running. Yes, so that way I can still be his good wife and just stick my Todd on him. So councils, we have 3. We have Council 1, Council 2, Council 3. The Council 1 is our laws and regulations. So if you have something like a simple food code update, Council 1 would probably deliver that issue. Council 2 is the stuff like the Food Protection Manager Certification, the program standards, our constitution and bylaws. So it's kind of the working of the conference. They also deal a lot with the training and certifications. So when stuff like allergy training comes up, that usually goes into Council 2. This past biennium, we had a whole lot of stuff about food safety management systems and digital food safety. Those were heard through Council 2. Council 3 is our food science and technology. That's my baby. That's the council I've sat on for a number of years. They debate basically new trends, new science, new technology, or things that are heavily science. So anything specialized processing typically is heard through Council 3. Okay. Each council has a chair and a vice chair. They do not vote. The chair can vote if there's a tie. Now the thing is we're trying to reach consensus during these council debates. So we really don't want a tie. Like, that's not ideal. So usually the chair will side on the no action side of things, because we haven't reached consensus if there's that big of a split. Not always, but a lot of times it's like, okay, we need to talk about this more. All 3 federal consultants sit on each council too. They do not have a vote. They're there to give advice. So, if you're debating a hot debate and FDA comes in and is like, yeah, we're not going to do that no matter how much you debate, a lot of times that kind of kills the conversation. It's like, even though FDA is not voting, if FDA is not going to do it, then why are we wasting our time talking about it, right? So, and then each council is based on balance. So what are we seeing here? We saw the 6 local, 6 state, and 6 industry on our board, it's the same thing here. So we are really based on that balance of industry and regulators. So Council 1 and Council 2, they have 9 regulators, 9 industry, 1 academic, and 1 consumer. That's set in stone. Science and technology, we do allow more at large because a lot of times we have more than 1 academic. You know, you want that academic side of things when you're talking about science and technology. Okay. So that's how our councils are set up. What do those councils do? Well, they debate issues. So if there's something, and it doesn't have to be a CFP member, it does not have to be Great Lakes, although here it is kind of nice that you have Great Lakes to run things through, so I would suggest doing that because you get kind of a consensus building before you go to the big consensus building nationwide. But anybody, a consumer, we had somebody from a consumer actually submit an issue last biennium, which was like, okay, that's cool. That's cool to see somebody who's just a consumer out in the everyday world go, I don't think this is being regulated right. Now that issue did kind of have to deal with COVID and hand washing at food establishments when you come through the door, but it was neat to see. Okay? So this is what an issue looks like. It's going to ask you, what do you want the conference to consider? What's the public health significance of that consideration? And what would your recommended solution be? This is what the council debates, and this is what they will either accept, reject, or no action, or they may amend the solution, and then this is what goes on to the next. The other thing that the councils do is they look at the committee work that's been created. So all the committees submit issues if they want either acknowledgement of a document or acceptance of a document or inclusion of a document into the food code, or if they actually have an issue. So we have a lot of issues that come in as committee work. So we have our council committees. Okay, so they actually report to the council chairs. The council chairs approve all their reports, and then the board looks at them, and then they submit them for acknowledgement and approval. And then we have our standing committees. They also will submit some issues. Not all committees submit issues. The main ones that usually do are our Food Protection Manager Certification Committee, our Program Standards Committee, and our Constitution, Bylaws, and Procedures. Okay. So like I said, we're trying to get consensus. We run on a Robert's Rules kind of loosely. We don't stick totally to it, or we'd be there like for 2 weeks, and we only have about, on average, we do about 14 to 16 hours of council debates over a week. So you have all those issues come in, and we get about 15 hours at council to look at them and go over them, which a lot of times breaks down to about 15 minutes an issue. So a lot of times what happens if you get stuck on an issue and you're debating it, you end up creating a committee, because then that committee will work for a year and a half and come back with an issue the next biennium. So that is a lot of what CFP does. It looks at issues, it creates committees, or it sends issues on for approval. Okay. There are 3 kind of things that can happen to an issue. You know, all of you remember the Schoolhouse Rock? I don't know if any of you, right? I mean, I'm old, but the Schoolhouse Rock, you know, how a bill becomes a bill. That's kind of what this is, how an issue becomes a food code change. So you can either be accepted as submitted, accepted as amended, or no action, which means it just dies on the floor. Okay. So then we move to the Assembly of Delegates. We have that 16 hours of heavy council debate, and it's rough. I mean, there are times you get 5 hours of sleep in an entire week because you're just like on the go, thinking about things, meeting in the hallway, going, man, that issue was really good and we killed it. How do we get it back to the table to talk about it again? Or, man, we passed that issue and now we're hearing from regulators that, this could be problems. So how do we fix that? You know, how do we now maybe correct that little mistake we made? Okay. So that's when we move to the Assembly of Delegates. So all the states, including our territories in DC, get a vote Now, if you have two agencies in your state, like we just have the Department of Agriculture, and the Department of Agriculture kind of oversees our local health departments. So we are your vote. If you have a state like Minnesota that has a Department of Health and a Department of Agriculture, and they both do food regulatory work, then each state agency gets a half vote. The one exception is Florida. Florida actually has 3 state agencies that oversee food establishments, because their hotels also do food work. Their section that oversees hotels also does some food work. So they get a 3rd vote. Each agency gets a 3rd vote if all 3 show up. So that's only if all the agencies show up. So there's a total of 53.5 possible votes because our territories in DC get a vote. So the Assembly of Delegates kind of gets the final say, per se, of what council debated. So that is where you can make your corrections, you can extract an issue, you can have a little bit further debate about the issue, and you can either kill it there at the Assembly of Delegates, or you can take a killed action and say to the board, hey, we want you to look at this again because we changed our mind, it was actually a good thing. Okay. So, what else happens during the biennial meeting? Like, that's not enough. Like all that council debate and all that. Well, a lot of it is networking, right? So just like this, we spend a lot of time talking to people in the hallways and coming up with ideas and catching up and finding out. So this is where it becomes very important to be in person, right? So you're talking about things that have potential impacts for the entire nation. You need to make those relationships. We're building that bridge between industry and regulatory, again, back to that mutual trust and respect. So being able to have conversations, even if they're a little contentious at times, is a good thing. So it's a lot of networking. We do have a workshop. Last time we went virtual with it ahead of time, so it was only a 3-hour workshop. You did get CEUs for that. So we do some training, but not really when you look at conference. All of our federal partners will give an update. The retail program standards used to do like a half-a-day meeting. Well, when you have a week of all of this other stuff going on, spending 4 hours listening to retail program standards was, to be frank, a little mind-numbing. So instead, we've gotten a grant through FDA to partner with MEHA, and we're going to start doing symposiums in the off years, on the years that CFP doesn't occur. Okay. The big thing is our caucus meetings. So caucus meetings occur throughout the entire council deliberations. Before we meet for council, the regulators all sit in a room and go, this is what we like, this is what we don't like, this is why, and people give their arguments. And that helps those 20 people or 9 regulators on Council 1 go, I thought that was a good idea. But now I'm hearing from 18 states that they hate that idea. So maybe I should consider and talk to more people about it before I make my vote at the council. So, and then they occur all throughout the biennial council debates, and then the last night when the issues are done and published, we have another big caucus meeting, and sometimes there's pizza and beverages, and we have fun, but we also talk about what happened and is there anything we need to fix before we get to the Assembly of Delegates. Okay. So once all that's done, then we start everything all over again. We form the committees that the council said wanted to be formed. We post the documents that were approved. We appoint new chairs for everything, and that is at the discretion of the conference chair. The board does kind of have a say in that, but they usually listen to the conference chair. We write the letter to the federal partners. So that's the big thing, right? We say to the federal partners, here's what CFP thinks you need to change. And that could be CDC, that could be FDA, that could be USDA. It all depends on what the council deliberations and Assembly of Delegates told us. Federal agencies then have 60 days to respond. Okay, so we did get that response from FDA from our last biennial meeting, and it is posted on our website. I have linked in the presentation for if these get posted, all the links to our website and actual specific places to go. Okay. So 2018 to 2020 biennium. We were supposed to meet the end of March 2020. That wasn't possible. The world shut down. So we had to rethink how we were going to do things. As you can see, that's a complicated process. We aren't just having speakers in a room that we can videotape. We're trying to have 20 people debate around a table and have people watch in the background and caucus and meet at night and discuss it some more. So we did move to virtual. It worked. It wasn't perfect. We were told in our survey, don't ever do that to us again. That was horrible. But we had some people who normally just watch go, that was great because I didn't have to travel and I didn't have to spend thousands of dollars to just go watch all this occur. So we are looking at ways to possibly do some different incorporation of being able to watch the process even if you're not involved in the process, so you don't have to spend lots of money. We used Pathable, and then we also used an Identify app to help keep, because you have 3 rooms debating at the same time. You have Council 1 in this room and Council 2 here and Council 3, and you may be doing a presentation of an issue that you are involved in Council 1, but you really want to hear the debate in Council 3. So how do you manage that? So it's a lot of, you're constantly looking to see what issue is coming up so that you know where to go in which room. Well, obviously on a computer that's hard. You're like trying to figure out, how do I log out of this room so I can log into another one? So that Identify app was used to help kind of track where the issues were. We were able to debate 105 issues over that virtual week. Yeah, and that's normal. I mean, we normally see between 190 to 110, 120 issues in a week. That's what I said, it's a lot of work. It's like 10 to 15 minutes an issue. Okay. So in Council 1, we had 35 issues total. 5 were from committee work. And Council 1, Rodney, was mean and sent 4 issues over to Council 3. So they ended up having to debate an extra 4 issues. As you can see, the Issues Committee does a lot of work to try to evenly break up. So sometimes that Council 1, Council 3, it's like, this should be a food and regulation, but Council 3 is a little short on issues, so let's even them out by moving them around. Huh? No, you were not short on issues. Science and technology is never short on issues. So Amanda was on our Council 3 this time. Rodney was on our Council 1. I was in the background, mission control with all the issues. So we were busy that week. Council 2 saw 33 issues. They did have 1 late breaking, and that was a simple Constitution and bylaws update to explain the pandemic. So, and 24 of the issues came from committee work, because that's a lot of what Council 2 does. It's that Program Standards Committee, and it's that Food Manager Protection Committee and our Constitution and Bylaws Committee. So there's a lot of issues that come from committee work in Council 2. Council 3, we had 14 from committee work out of the 34. A lot of the Council 3 committee work is like guidance documents. So those are useful things, and we will show you which ones those were in a minute. So who submitted issues? As you will see, it's not really any one person. State regulatory does have kind of the majority of the voice, and that's because a lot of states will take things from their locals, like stuff that they learn. A lot of the other states have people like us that are in constant communication with locals, and it will be the locals that go, hey, why does the code not say this? Or why does the code say it this way? Or what does this mean? Can we get a further interpretation on it? And so then the state will actually take that as an issue for them. Organizations, we had 11. Our Great Lakes Conference on Food Protection is considered one of those kind of organizational. So when you look at those 11, those are coming from issues from Great Lakes Conference on Food Protection, and those could be from local, state, academia, or industry. Okay. And then we do have some like industry and a local, got together and submitted an issue jointly so that hopefully it would make it through a little better. This was the outcome. Okay. So not everything passes. We had 105 total issues. We had no action on 15 in Council 1, 2 in Council 3, and 15 in Council 3. So 32 issues did not make it through the process, just kind of died at the floor. The rest made it through and then went to the Assembly of Delegates. The Assembly of Delegates did agree with all the council recommendations. So everything made it through and was put in the letter to a federal agency or given to the board for the board to do something with. These were all the new guidance documents that were created. I'm not going to read them all off. You have them here. You can go to our website and look at them all. The ones that I want to point out that will be useful for you guys in this room are the maybe whole roaster pig guidance, safe handling and cooking. So if you deal with whole roaster pigs and want some help for your industry on how to be safe about those. There was a committee, USDA sat on that committee, actually helped head up that committee and created that document. The NACMF parameters for challenge studies. So if you are FD 312 certified and you start seeing a NACMF procedure, National Advisory Committee on Microbiological Control of Foods. It's a specific set of study parameters that you use if you want to study food to make sure it's safe in the process that you want to use. There's some guidance documents to help you with that, a checklist for industry to use to know how to set up a NACMF study. So those are good ones. There is some guidance, and I know this question has come up from locals here in the state about washing fruits and vegetables. Okay. And then some guidance for food recovery programs they added for handouts for if you want to donate food. So those are some things to go look at. They're on our website. Of course, we have new council leaders, and of course, I had to put Tom McMahon on here because I know one of his employees, Liz, is watching virtually. So Council 1 is Michigan. Go Michigan. So Tom McMahon is with Meyer. He's out of Grand Rapids, and then Rodney Blanchard is our vice chair. Rodney will move to vice chair in the next chair in the next biennium, and he will get to pick a new industry person. So all of our councils work with opposite constituencies. So if your chair is a regulator, then your vice chair is going to be industry. Okay. So we have Joetta DeFrancisco. She's with Florida Department of Agriculture. She's our Council 2 chair till today. She's leaving the straight Florida department, so I have to find somebody new there. And Courtney Hallbrook is with Topgolf. Yay, Tanya. And then Council 3, I know many of you have probably heard me talk about Dr. Don Schaffner, you know, the bad bug guy. He has the food blog with Ben Chapman. So he is an academic. So again, the Science and Technology Council gets to have academic representation as council chair as well as on the council in a higher proportion. And then he's picked Chip Manuel as his vice chair, who is with Gojo Industries, so the Perel makers. Here are the committees, the council committees that were created. Yeah, we've had a total of 23 committees acting this biennium. It's been a lot of work to try and fill those rosters with people. Council 1 is looking at a joint shellfish committee. So in our recent food code update, they wanted to align things with ISSC a little bit better. So this committee is looking at educational resources for shellfish for our industry, and regulators. And then we have the Foodborne Illness Investigation Committee, which is looking at like shopper card and foodborne illness investigations. Council 2 has a lot going on. A lot of it deals with training. So they have 3 different committees that are kind of dealing with different training components within industry, okay, as well as some allergens. The Local Regulatory Representation Committee, as local regulators said, hey, why do the states get to be on the Assembly of Delegates and not us? So they're actually looking, is there a way for locals to be part of the Assembly of Delegates? Locals are involved the entire time through. They have seats. It's required that they have seats on every committee. It's required that they have seats on every council. They have seats on the board. So they do have a voice throughout the process. They're just not at the Assembly of Delegates. Only the states are. Council 3, they're looking at, again, more HACCP stuff. I will tell you, out of the years that I've been participating, probably 10% of the issues that come in deal with specialized processing, HACCP, and variance, because those are the complicated areas of the food code. Okay. And then safe use of, and that's supposed to be container, but safe use of returnable container committee. So some stuff about, can I bring in my own container and fill it with bulk foods? So that's a committee that's looking at what are some ways to maybe reduce waste and reuse containers, but how can we do that safely within the food code? Okay. So what happened when it comes to the food code? So we did have FDA's response. We do have an idea of what they want or said that they're okay with putting in the food code. We just aren't sure what it's going to look like, right? So we haven't seen it, the food code's not updated. These are just the ones that FDA said, yep, we agree with you, CFP, so we're gonna go ahead and work on a way to incorporate that. Some of these are just simple changes, right? Like changing CFR 110 to 117 in the annex in the code, because that's an update in the CFRs. Updating 1201 to, instead of saying fruits and vegetables, to say plant food, so that we can encompass that whole plant food category, since some of the food code references plant food in some areas, and then our definition said fruits and vegetables. Okay. Some of them are a little more just cross-reference or stuff that need to be cleaned up. So that's what a lot of these changes are. And you can go on our website and see the FDA letter if you're interested. We did have 2 things that came out of the CFP, the storage and toilet rooms. Thanks, Rodney. And a requirement for PICs to have oversight during thawing. Council 2, really the only thing that's changing the food code from Council 2 is allergen requirements. So there has been a big focus in the last few years to update the food code to include more allergen requirements. So we'll see how it looks in the food code. Some of this has to do with labeling of bulk foods and consumer notification of unpackaged foods. How that's gonna look for the nation and the in the food code guidance, we'll see. Obviously, as you know, Michigan's still on the 09 code, so how many years before we're gonna get a 2021 code, I don't know.
Does anybody know?
Nope. We have proposals out there for the 2017, so we have a food law proposal out there. We just haven't had anybody take it up to make it law, to update that law. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay, and then Council 3, a lot of this is annex stuff. So adding the guidance documents that were approved into the annexes of the food code as a reference. They did decide to change that 100-degree water at hand sinks, because there's really no scientific reason why we have 100. It was just kind of a standard. Now it's going to say tempered water instead of 100 degrees. Okay. This was probably our favorite. It was the very last issue of Council 3, and as you imagine, you're kind of brain dead at the end of all of this, and then you get an issue that says, let's remove expelled air. How do you say that with a straight face? You don't. So in the definition of cook chill, there is the words, and air is expelled out of the package. Well, in cook chill, because you're consuming the oxygen, you don't have to actually press the air out. So it was just kind of a clarification that you don't have to do cook chill and expel the air, that really just the cook chill is all that's needed. Okay. And you can ask questions if you read the letter and you want to know more of what occurred. You can ask Rodney, Amanda, you can ask Sean, you can ask me. I'm not letting you off easy. Told you I wouldn't. Okay, so some things that are happening now. We do have the collaborative with NACHO, local health, and we're working on the program standards and how to promote that more for local health. And MEHA is doing that symposium with us on the off years. These are some important dates. So issue submission is going to start roughly December 2022. So get ready if you want to submit issues. It's going to be open for 30 days. Okay. The issues will be posted, so if you're interested to see what's going to be debated, then roughly March of 2022, or sorry, that should be 2023. They'll be published on the website, and then our biennial meeting is occurring in Houston from April 21st to the 28th of 2023. We are looking at, knock on wood, the board will be looking at maybe having a virtual ticket where you won't be able to participate, but you will be able to see some of the, like the workshop and the assembly of delegates, so you can get an idea of what this looks like in person, because me explaining it as much as I tried, you just still don't get the idea. Okay, so there's our website. It's not the best, most navigable website, but if you want to go try it out, try it out. All right, so why does this matter? So what have I said all along, right? You guys can submit issues if you want. You can be the change. This is one of the areas in a federal regulation. I know it's only a guidance, but it's a very widely used guidance document that becomes regulation. You can make a difference. Great Lakes Conference of Food Protection has taken lots of issues from local health. So Jason Childress down in Monroe has submitted an issue. Jim Pankwitz in District 10 years ago submitted issues. Rodney submitted issues a lot when he was with local, and he still does. Amanda's submitted issues. So you can have your voice heard if you see something that doesn't make sense or you want an interpretation of. Since 2012, Michigan has taken 35 issues through the Great Lakes Conference of Food Protection. So keep that in mind. We have made 8 food code changes over that time. Doesn't seem like a lot, but if you watch the process, it's a lot. That is actually considered very successful to have 8 out of 35 food code changes. Plus we've done some other things, like we've had a couple interpretations from FDA that are now out there as an interpretation. We've had a committee formed, we had a focus group formed, and we kind of have one cooperative agreement, kind of in a way. Mr. Padden submitted an issue last time that said, hey, CFP just needs to write their own food code because FDA doesn't always listen to us. We go through all this work and we submit it, and then FDA says, yeah, we're not going to put that in the food code. So what came out of council was more, FDA needs to work with the CFP board a little bit more to address items that they do not feel should be in the food code, even though it went through the entire cooperative, balanced, heavily mutual whole process, and then FDA says no at the end. Okay. So we have had 15 no actions at council. That's actually not bad. It means we need to work on it. It doesn't mean that issue dies. It means we take what we heard and figure out how to fix it. So like Amanda's presentation, for those of you who were in it yesterday, she took copper mugs, or Great Lakes took copper mugs. She ended up with a whole IFPTI project out of it to try to figure out how can we maybe better convince FDA that needs to be an update or a change. We've had 66 FDA not concur. So this is where Jim Padden's issue kind of came from, was out of those 35 issues, 6 times it made it through the entire CFP process, and then FDA went, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Some of those issues were like sore throat with fever. We wanted that to be treated more like vomiting and diarrhea, that you can come back to work 24 hours after being symptom-free. FDA says, nope, you have to be diagnosed first and be on antibiotics and have a doctor's excuse. So something we don't enforce as much in the state, maybe, but it is in the food code that way. Cedar planks is another one that we have taken twice now, and even though they're widely used in the industry, FDA is still saying you can't use them. So everybody at CFP thinks it's okay. So the future of CFP, obviously we want to go more tech-based. We want to get our website updated. Our issues management system needs updated. We need to come into the 2020s. Maybe look towards 2030, but we're still in 1990 with some of our tech stuff behind the scenes. And I put hybrid options in both outreach and more tech, because obviously with hybrid, you're going to need a lot more tech and a lot more solutions, stuff like this. This was great. They did a wonderful job here. Yes, give them. So it's wonderful that people over there could pay a little bit less, not have to travel. We're able to see everything. They're going to have recordings of everything. That is awesome. So we want to keep some of that ability like this at CFP. And then that will allow us, so the constituencies that we're low on: academics, consumers, local regulatory. If you remember, we need that balance in order to operate. We have to have those people on our board, we have to have those people on our council, and we have to have those people on our committees. I had to fill 23 committees this year with 6 academics. You can't have an academic on every committee when you only have 6, but yet 23 committees. And local regulators, we only had 40 local regulators. So I'm calling out to Brandon Morrell and Jennifer Harris and Amanda going, please sit on a committee for me, please, because I need to fill this with a regulator spot and I need locals. And they were members and they knew what kind of was involved with that work. So if you become a member, it's $100 for 2 years. I would suggest you wait until closer to April of 2023 so you can operate on the committees that work between 2023 and 2025. It's less than Apple TV each month. So we do want to do more frequent updates. So we want to have things like webinars on what our committee's done or what our committee's created, stuff that people can go view and actually know what CFP is. Because I think we've been the secret organization for too long. And people just think you need a certain knock and a handshake to get in the door, and you don't. Okay. So I know. So this was taken, and I know I'm going to cry, so I'll hopefully cry quickly and then be able to take questions afterwards. This was taken, do you remember this picture? Florida 2016. After a week of 5 issues him and I took, Mr. Dunleavy, we had really good success. It was a really fun conference. We were in Florida in May, so beautiful weather, and we got to go outside 3 times. So a lot of hard work, but I do have to give it to this guy right here, because if it weren't for him, I wouldn't be here. So he got me into this. He was my mentor before I became to the state. He's been my mentor for the last too many years. I won't say it because it'll give away my age, let alone your age. But really, I mean, he encouraged me every time we went to CFP to be me. So, thank you. And every time he cries, I end up crying harder. So I'm not going to look. All right. So really, find your person. And hopefully, maybe one day I can be that same mentor for you if you make it there on site. Okay? And I would. I love CFP, and I'm there to encourage more of you to get involved in Great Lakes. And then hopefully, like Jennifer and Brandon and Amanda, take Great Lakes and move on to CFP and come there and be involved. So reach out. Rachel Steining and Claudia Terrell are your current Great Lakes Conference on Food Protection leadership. Reach out to them, get involved. So I know this seemed like a sales rep for Great Lakes and CFP, and it was. So just to be All right, questions? Yes, Becca.
So when you typically get together, your regulators, your industry, and your academics, everybody's kind of bringing their own, like primary interests, such as like financial or political or whatever else. Do you see that same dynamic here, or is it much more single, like focused?
So when we all get together and everybody brings their own interest, it's a little of both. I mean, we do have the one guy who every year brings the hand washing issue up and wanting to kind of allow a double hand sanitizing versus hand washing. And that's his own business. So, and it gets debated, and he has some good, that's a great process if you're at an emergency and you don't have hand washing. So he has the science there to support that. And you as local regulators have the ability to prove that under the food code, right? You have the variance options. So we're not saying it's not a good idea, it's just how do you word that in the food code that doesn't make it seem like industry could use that all the time and just not putting in hand sinks. So there's a little bit of kind of personal, business, financial, but really at the end of the day, I mean, I have walked up to Brian Nummer, my very first issue with the thawing fish at ROP, and he shot that issue down at the council. He was at the council table, he shot that down. I walked out and bought him a beer. And we talked about it, and it's now in the food code. So you can make change through that networking and that consensus. You go up and you think, oh my gosh, this is dying at the council table. What am I doing wrong by bringing this issue? And then you have all of a sudden 10 regulators walk up to you going, oh my gosh, we see the same thing. How do we convince people? And so then you go talk to people. So you can. It's a lot of that relationship building, that mutual respect and that trust. And we have an antitrust statement that says, you know, when we're together and when we're talking about stuff, we're not going to bash people. We're not going to talk bad about each other. We're going to trust each other through this process and be adults and professional. So it's good. It is. It's energizing. And there's been a lot of times we've taken an issue thinking it's a problem, and then you hear other people's interpretations of the same food code and went, yeah, we were wrong. We interpreted that wrong. Yes, Tony. No, they sit at the council and they do kind of steer some of that conversation, but it's when they get back that they decide, and then they submit their letter to the board, and then, as we said, the FDA sits on the board as a voting member, so then the board has the ability to question FDA further, like, you know, you need to go do this, or you need to have science, or maybe you need to think of it this way. And FDA, if you look at the letter that was just done, there's a couple of sections that the FDA says, well, we partially concur with you, but we want to meet with the board and discuss it more.
Who makes the final decision for FDA changes?
Oh, for when FDA wants to change the food, they run it through the same process. I'm sorry, I was going to say that during this presentation, but if FDA wants to make a change, a substantive change, not a I want to change this cross-reference because we updated this food code section. Like that CFR 110 to 117, they could have just done that on their own. That didn't have to be run through the CFP process. But if they want to change something substantive, then they have to submit an issue and they run it through the process. And Rodney can tell you about sanitizer test strips.
I'm thinking like the retail program standards and then standard 8, that, I mean, I don't know how many years those standards have been in place, 30 years, something like that. And I think there's only a handful, maybe 5 local health departments that can meet it, because you can't meet the staffing. And we've been talking about that for years. And I just noticed that you said there's 3 guidance memos for alternatives, but what's the incentive for local health to do that? I mean, you can't meet the standard. And if you go through this every couple of years, you know, and those changes are being
A lot of their committee work, I mean, like FDA is involved on that committee, but a lot of the committee work and then the issues that get submitted for standards changes come from the program standards committee. When it comes to posting stuff like the crosswalk, so you'll see there is a new crosswalk for foodborne illness training programs under Standard 5. They'll ask FDA to post that with the program standard stuff, but that's been approved, and that was committee work that was done to create that crosswalk. They put it through the CFP issues process. The CFP councils and assembly of delegates agreed with it, and it's posted on our website. So really it is, the program standards is a little bit more housed with CFP than FDA. It's just we work cooperatively with FDA, and we get all the money from FDA, right? So, that it? Oh, Jim.
Just one thing, so with the whole retail program standards, FDA has kind of opened the door. They're starting to work with MEHA, and there is really a whole process, I think, starting up to, I think they finally have recognized, like, gee whiz, maybe this isn't really structured correctly, you know, because the manufactured food program standards have gained almost universal adoption across the country. So I think that's come right down from Frank Giannis at FDA that they need to revisit the retail standard.
Yeah, and that's,
Yeah, it's definitely a fail. So they recognize that and started to.
so yeah, NACHO and NEHA both have cooperative grants with CFP to work on the program standards and to do stuff like the symposiums and to encourage, improve, mentor. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that have been thrown at these two organizations in CFP to work on the program standards and be a little bit more. And they now have the Sunday kind of funding model where you get the bases and then you build on that with all your toppings. So they're trying. Is it gonna? It's really hard when you have something that's such a beast to rework it in a way without changing it so much for the people that are already in it. I mean, you almost kind of have to have, like we do with accreditation, option 1 and option 2. You almost need to have retail program standards option 1 and retail program standards option 2. If you've already met one, great, yay, kudos for you, but maybe option 2 would be better for the people who are just getting started or smaller health departments. I mean, those are all great ideas. Getting on that program standards committee, which it's hard because it's a highly competitive committee. There's a lot of people that want to be on it and they can only have so many. They can only have between 11 and 23 committee members. That's how our bylaws are set up. But they can have non-voting people who can speak, they just can't vote. That's really the way to get on it. So spend your Apple TV account money on CFP and get involved in the committees, come talk to people while you're there, listen to the symposiums, ask questions. They've stole, Andre Pierce was our council or our standing committee vice chair for program standards. FDA just stole him to work on program standards. Joetta DeFrancisco, who was with Florida, she's now been stolen to work with NEHA on program standards. So they're stealing a lot of our good people to work on that. Anybody? Hey, then we're done. So thank you guys for coming this week.
So these are going to be my closing remarks now because I know everybody wants to check out after this. So this is going to be quick, but there will be a raffle if you want to go and check out.
and then come back for the raffle at 11, I believe. Oh, as soon as possible, I guess. So if you could just check out after this. I wanted to send a big thank you to the virtual crowd. I think we're still going live right now. So thank you, virtual crowd, for being here still with us. Thank you, in-person people. Thank you, Park Place Hotel. This is awesome. What a cool venue, right? Like, this is really neat in Traverse City. Thank you, Creative Eye, over there for doing the virtual component. Thank you, board members. Thank you, committee chairs. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you, exhibitors. Who am I missing? I don't know. Everybody, thank you for being here. So I'd just like to reiterate what I said before. If you want to become a part of MEHA, get a hold of the board, get a hold of a committee chair, because we'd love to have you. So if you're like new to this environmental health or I don't know, club or whatever this is, for being a part of it, we'd love to get you involved. So if you have good ideas about where you want to see MEHA go, we would love to have you. And then I do have one more shout out I forgot I want to go back to. Ottawa County Health Department. I couldn't have done this presidency without their support. So I couldn't have spent the time to make some of this stuff happen without them. So thank you to Ottawa County. Yeah. And just shout out to my dad for being here too. He got me started in this too. So thank you, Dad. Yeah. I think he worked for close to 40 years in environmental health. So I think that's, kudos enough for him. He just retired, 5 years ago, I think. So in closing, we're going to be in Port Huron next year. I think you should be there because it's going to be even probably more fun. Maybe, who knows, maybe by then we won't. Well, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to jinx it. Just come to Port Huron next year. We'll probably try to do probably hybrid again, virtual and in person. So if you can't be here in person next year, do the virtual, because I think that's going to add a lot of value. By the way, you guys can watch every single event that happened during this. You can get up to, I think, 32 continuing education credits. So go back online, watch those ones, fill out the survey. And so say you have NEHA credentials, you're done almost for the 3-year renewal or 2-year renewal, I believe. So by doing this, so thank you again for coming. John has a question.
Andy, I was wondering what you thought about just having a raffle now, that everybody online and everybody in the room.
That's not a bad idea. Brian? Can somebody grab Brian?
No, because I want to lay out everything
on the tables. He wants to lay it out. That was a great idea, though. I like that, too. So maybe go and get your stuff done real quick and come right back, see if you can win anything. So thank you once again. Big round of applause to everybody.
Sunrise paints these cherry-colored clouds, wakes the earth, shining rays out on the ground, brings to life our town below the base, where there's great food and better people. Everyone's a friend, all are welcome, where the compass ends, to raise a toast to one more day. I feel it calling me, it's drawing me in. I feel it calling me, it's drawing me in. Take me there, take me where it's pushing, pulling me along. Takes me slow, my heart is full, everything's right from wrong. Smiles dancing, sun and snow, nothing ever looks so pretty on my mind, oh my. Take me there to Traverse City. I'm dreaming of a paradise, the mine is in the north. This feeling brings me back, always wanting more. Close my eyes, and the moments and memories always make me smile.